An exploration of ancestral Harari spirituality, from indigenous beliefs to Islam, by Harari Freethinkers. It does not seem that the religious sense of the Muslim derives only from his religion. This religious sense has deeper roots buried in the collective unconscious of mankind. The primitive conscience of man has an innate craving for representing primordial thoughts or archetypes. These thoughts dwell in the collective memory through the use of symbols such as trees, rocks, and incense offerings. A symbol is a language, a media which is used to express the mystery of man, the mystery of divinity, eventually the totally other, whose attributes are thus revealed, felt, sensed through these symbols. The Cult of Muslim Saints in Harlaa, Religious Dimension, 1994. Introduction. The Harari people developed as a mix of diverse, existing ethnic groups. These groups include the Adare and the Harlaa. But what did these people believe in before Islam? Indigenous belief systems in Ethiopia, also referred to historically as paganism, unlike Christianity and Islam, do not have a tradition of preserving its history and principles. While some research exists that examines the diverse indigenous beliefs and practices within Ethiopia since antiquity, very little has been done that sheds light into the pre-Islamic beliefs of the Harari people specifically. So far, research has not found any historical records of the pre-Islamic beliefs of people who lived in the Harlaa area. However, it is known that the people practiced indigenous religions. Despite the little that is known about the Harari people's pre-Islamic beliefs, one can still make inferences into what they may have believed. This can be achieved through the study of the non-Islamic beliefs and practices of neighboring and related groups and even present-day Harari culture. This article will explore how over centuries, various religious beliefs influenced the thoughts and actions of the Harari people's ancestors. Animism. Animism is not a religion with a set of rules or doctrine. Rather, it is both an ancient concept and a way of viewing and relating to the world. It includes the attribution of sentience, or the quality of being animated, to a wide range of beings such as people, animals, the environment, plants, spirits, and forces of nature like bodies of water, winds, the sun, or the moon. Animism is a key element of both ancient and modern religions. As will be explored in this article, animism is a common feature in many of the pre-Islamic religions and practices that likely contributed to the ancestral Harari belief system. Eebe Waaq. The Harlaa and Somali have historically lived in close geographic proximity. Today, the areas in which the Harlaa are believed to have lived are inhabited largely by the Oromo and Somali. Some believe ancient stone structures built between the ancient Somali port of Xyla and Harare were built by the Harlaa. The geopolitical state lines that separate Ethiopia and Somalia are a relatively modern innovation. Throughout history, the various indigenous groups moved between these lands. The Somali, like the Harlaa people, are an ancient civilization dating back thousands of years. The Somali and the Harlaa may have a shared history because some Somali groups claim to be related to them. Prior to the introduction of Islam, the Somali people believed in a complex monotheistic religion called Eebe Waaq. The complex belief system includes many deities, with the highest, most powerful sky god called Waaq. Waaq is a deity associated with many different parts of life like rain, sacred trees, peace, and fertility. To this day, Waaq is worshipped as a creator god by various Cushitic East African ethnic groups such as the Sidamo, Konso, Ngideo, and Samaramo. The Oromo religion that worships Waaq is called Wakafana. Archaeological work in Somalia has revealed a link between the pre-Islam belief system of Eebe Waaq with Somalia's more recent Islamic practice. Eebe Waaq may have been part of the Harlaa people's beliefs. This is apparent by rock paintings in the area that have been connected to Cushitic culture and belief in Waaq. There is even a Somali song that describes Harare as the land of Waaq. Veneration of intermediaries between humans and God. Eebe Waaq is a belief system that consists of several angels called Ayanli. The Ayanli are thought of as being good spirits or angels between Waaq and humans. they are venerated. In Harare, there are over 100 shrines. The precise number is not known, but 103 and 107 have been suggested. The shrines vary in appearance. They could be a classic, dome-shaped structure, a space in a home or an unmarked space, or even natural elements like rocks, trees, and rivers. The shrines are places where saints, female and male, called awliya, are paid respect. Just like the exact number of shrines, the number of saints is not agreed upon. Estimates vary from 235, 272 to 356. These saints represent deceased people who were important in the history of Harare through their life's deeds, such as prominent Islamic scholars or propagators of Islam. They are believed to be favored by Allah, were capable of performing miracles in their lifetimes, and hold a supernatural power called baraka, blessings. Many are thought of as the ancestors of the local people and are believed to watch over the city and protect it from harm. This means many saints are actually patron saints. The saints are thought of as acting as intermediaries between Allah and humans. While saints in the Harari culture are not worshipped like Ayan Lee are in Eebe Waaq, they are highly respected. Consultation of the spiritual world. In Eebe Waaq, places of religious significance are visited to consult the spiritual world for help with issues like fertility. For example, the Oromo would participate in a tradition called Mutta, where they would make a pilgrimage and perform rituals and songs at shrines. Today in Harare, the Islamic practice of ziyarah occurs, by some Harari people, and consists of visiting religious sites like the shrines of saints. These shrines would sometimes contain the tomb where the saint is said to be buried. Visitors pay their respects to the dead by reciting the Quran, making dua, praying and asking for baraka or help from the saint. Different saints are called upon for different reasons, and some even represent specific days of the week and gates of Harare. Examples of blessings that are asked for are the promotion of female fertility and to cure illnesses. In Harare, if the blessing was acquired, an animal sacrifice was made in return. The animal, usually male, would be slaughtered at the doorstep of the shrine. This practice of animal sacrifice continued by peoples of the Harari Plateau, including the Somali, until at least the 19th century. In the 21st century, incense, food and chat is offered at the shrines, but not in return for a blessing or a prayer. These offerings are instead made as expressions of general appreciation and piety. In Harare, Islamic celebrations like Ashura, Arafah, and Nabi Maulud all occur at shrines. Afterlife and ancestral worship. In traditional African religions, it is commonly believed that an afterlife exists after death. While indigenous African beliefs and practices vary across the vast continent, there are some common elements. These elements are rooted in ancestor worship. When someone dies, they can either enter the spirit world and continue to exist there or remain on earth as a wandering ghost. The spirit world is considered the home of an ancestor, and once there, they can bless or curse people. As a wandering ghost, the ancestor can be dangerous. After a burial takes place, post-burial ceremonies are held to facilitate the deceased in reaching the spirit world. If the deceased is not given a proper post-burial ceremony as tradition dictates, they will not reach the spirit world and will be trapped on earth as a ghost. Traditional African post-burial ceremonies are community-wide affairs. During the events, the community joins together to grieve and provide support. As part of the post-burial ceremonies, it is common for an animal to be sacrificed. The animal is believed to accompany the deceased into the spirit world. In Harari culture, post-funeral cultural ceremonies are called a Mutta Fada, funeral recitation. Traditionally, the community would meet 3 days, 9 days, and then 1 month after the burial. At these gatherings, the Harari people read the Quran, pray for the deceased and enjoy cultural foods and drinks. If the deceased was elderly, a drumming ceremony called a Mutta Caribou, funeral drums, is held. During this ceremony, zikri, religious songs, would be sung to remind people to strive for the afterlife. Similarly, drumming is also included as part of the traditional post-funeral ceremonies for the elderly in West African groups such as the Kankamba and Dogon. These ceremonies are celebratory in nature because it is believed that the elderly will reach the afterlife because of their age, social prestige and children. While Amuda Fada in its traditional form is rarely, if ever practiced today, upon the death of a Harari person, the community will always gather to grieve and support one another in a custom called Amuda Gar, funeral gathering. Phallic Symbolism. Phallic elements are common in the Horn of Africa in archaeology and ethnography, i.e. on stele, grave markings, and portable phallic objects. This suggests a widespread pre-Islamic fertility ideology. There are even traditional dances by Ethiopian Muslims that are believed to be remnants of the past fertility ideology. In Somalia, the Al-Barkadleh shrine was a pre-Islamic, later Islamic, place of fertility rituals that contained phallic stele and gravestones. Al-Barkadleh is a saint who is sought for help with infertility issues by women. Phallic symbolism is also present in Oromo culture where there is a wooden phallic-shaped object called a kalecha. In Harari culture, the presence of phallic symbolism is frequent. Many Harari basketry motoch appear to be phallic-shaped. However, it may also be that the shape was intended to emulate the minaret of a mosque. Harari basketry has many functions and forms part of the dowry for a woman in preparation for her marriage. Perhaps they were meant to be symbols of fertility, wishing that the newly married couple bear children. Phallic-shaped Harari jewelry has also been discovered. Superstitious beliefs and practices. Zar. Widespread in Ethiopian communities is the belief in Zar spirits. Muslim, Christian, Jewish and pagan peoples in Ethiopia all share this belief. It is believed that Zar was originally the ancient sky god of the Agao, or Aga, people. Zar is also believed by the Somali. Zar spirits are thought of as male or female and have their own personalities and abilities. They are believed to have ill intentions and wish to bring harm to people. These evil spirits can reside in spaces like homes or possess people, causing illness. If one is possessed by a Zar spirit, an exorcism ritual is performed. One exorcism method that is used by Ethiopian peoples is the sacrifice of a hen. The hen would be swung around the head of the afflicted person and then smashed into the ground. If the hen died, then it meant the evil spirit was passed to the hen and was removed from the person. If the hen didn't die, the process would be repeated until it did die. By pleasing the evil Zar spirits, it is believed misfortune could be avoided. The Somali Zar exorcisms consist of a ritualistic dance that puts the victim into a trance. It is believed that the Harari people do, or did, believe in these Zar spirits. In modern Harari culture, there are superstitions, believed by some, related to the existence of evil spirits. These evil spirits can invade homes or possess people. Protection from evil spirits is believed to come through many ways. One way is through the Quran, either by physical representations of it, or by Quran recitation. Another is by making supplications to Allah, dua, i.e. asking Allah for protection from evil spirits. The dua and incense burned during a traditional Ethiopian coffee ceremony is yet another way of safeguarding one's physical space and being from evil spirits. If one is believed to be afflicted by an evil spirit, various rituals can be performed. Ritual curing was also performed using amulets that are written by a kabir. Another method of protection against evil spirits is invoked while a woman is in her postpartum confinement stage, harass. During this time it was believed that her body is weak and thus susceptible to possession by evil spirits. For her to regain her strength and protect herself from possession, she would take laxatives, bathe in myrrh, and eat sorghum. Adbar. Another widespread Ethiopian belief is in spirits called Adbar. Unlike Zar, Adbar spirits are thought of as having a protective function. They are embodied within the natural world like trees, mountains, rocks, and water. They belong to the community and can be either male or female. The female Adbar is thought to protect the community from disease, misfortune, and poverty, while the male Adbar is said to prevent fighting, feuds, and war and to bring good harvests. People normally pay tribute to the Adbars in the form of honey, grains, and butter. In Harari culture, while the concept of protective spirits doesn't exist, the practice of appealing for wellness or goodness, care, does. During a traditional Ethiopian coffee ceremony, not only are evil spirits warded away, goodness is also appealed for to Allah. Resembling the function of the Adbar protective spirits though, are the patron saints mentioned earlier. Because the shrines of the patron saints are sometimes represented by natural elements like trees, rocks, and bodies of water, it perhaps suggests a prior belief in Adbar. Buddha, evil eye. Belief in Buddha is widespread in Ethiopia and around the world. In Ethiopia, it is considered a power that is believed to rest within certain marginalized social groups and is rooted in envy. Those who bear the Buddha are thought to be able to cause misfortune to others and turn into a hyena. To protect oneself from the Buddha curse, some Ethiopians wear an amulet. In modern Harari culture, the concept of Buddha still exists as a common superstition. It is believed that jealous and envious people can curse others with the evil eye simply by looking at them. Those who have the evil eye are called kamuna in the Harari language. Similar to the protection methods invoked to prevent possession of evil spirits, individuals and traditional healers can perform various rituals to excise this curse from people. Physical representations of the Quran and Quran recitation can also be used to ward off the Buddha. A common way some Harari people today try to prevent giving the Buddha curse to others is by saying mashallah after giving a compliment. Humans with supernatural abilities. The belief that certain humans have supernatural abilities is another example of how superstitions exist within Harari tradition. The Harari people have historically believed in diviners, falgar, and magicians and sorcerers, sahar. These people are thought to possess supernatural powers. The Harari saints, mentioned earlier, are another group of people thought to possess supernatural powers. Sacred nature. Areas of land. In pre-Islamic religions, the idea of sacred areas of land was well established. For example, in pre-Islamic Arabia, idols would center around sacred spaces. This correlates to how even today, the city of Harra is thought of as split into 7 circles of holiness, called surti in the Harari language. The holiness of the city is strongest at its innermost circle, where the Faraz Magala, literally, horse market, is located. The Faraz Magala was previously where the main mosque for Friday prayers was situated. The holiness of the city wanes the further away one moves from its center. Specific saints are thought of as reigning over the circles and are chief of the other saints whose shrines exist within the area. The modern-day sacredness of the physical areas of the city may represent pre-Islamic associations between the land and the spiritual world. Rocks and trees. In addition to sometimes being the representation of a shrine in Harra, rocks have other spiritual connections. For example, rocks are sometimes associated with the memory of Islamic figures such as the wali. There are rocks that are remembered as being passed by a wali, situated near the home of a wali, and even the place where a wali would rest their walking stick. The symbolic use of rocks may be the remnant of pre-Islamic beliefs that also gave this ubiquitous element of nature religious significance. This idea is further supported by the use of rocks in pre-Islamic stone circles that are present in the area inhabited by the nearby Oromo Ichu clan. These pre-Islamic stone circles were later transformed into Islamic places of worship. There is evidence that trees may have played a role in the indigenous belief systems of the ancestral Harari people. In Harar's past there was a tree known as Harar. It has been recorded that children were warned to not cut this tree. If the children did, they were told their parents would argue. The carefulness around this tree demonstrates how it was meaningful to the Harari people for some reason. Despite the Harari being Muslims for hundreds of years, they still passed on what appears to be remnants of animistic beliefs about this tree. In addition, the East African Eebe Waaq belief system discussed previously is associated with sacred trees. One tree is the African olive tree, from which the wood was used to make a fertility symbol called wagar. For the Ethiopian Muslims in modern-day Mursa, certain trees are believed to be sacred and are watched over by the Adare protective spirit. The trees are the places of religious ceremonies and have special rules associated with them in terms of who can go near them or touch them. Today, some Oromo and Konso groups worship trees. Trees also hold traditional beliefs in Harari history. The tombs and shrines of saints are often made under the tree in which they would preach. For instance, at the shrine of Saint Iabida sits a large, lush tree. According to legend, Iabida was the wife of Adare, the patron saint of Harlaa. Iabida's shrine is a place of pilgrimage for women to seek blessings/intercession for issues related to marriage and fertility. A tree could even be the shrine to a saint. Trees are also sometimes planted near the tomb of the saint to offer shade to followers. The trees are considered as votives, provided as fulfillment of a vow to the saint. They are used as reminders of the actions of the saints. If the tree is thought of as being connected to a saint, sometimes the tree's branches will not be cut, out of respect. This mirrors the special considerations that occur in Mursa with regards to their sacred trees. Possibility of polytheism. Burials with pottery. In the land around eastern Ethiopia to Somaliland, there are skeletons that were found near a stone slab-covered tomb with pots resting above their heads. Inside the pots was black sand. Perhaps this burial practice of the pots with the deceased served a religious purpose. Also, as far back as the 10th century in Ethiopia, graves with goods, including ceramics, beads, and bracelets, have been found. These graves are believed to be of people who practiced indigenous religions and lived in close proximity to the Islamic Sultanate of Shoa. The grave goods were a marker of the indigenous people's identity. The ancient Ghanaians also buried the deceased with ceramic vessels. These vessels were related to beliefs about ancestors and the afterlife. This practice is similar to the burial of canopic jars with Egyptian mummies. These jars would be placed in tombs, buried with the deceased. The jars were buried for religious purposes related to the ancient Egyptians' belief in an afterlife and their gods. Ethiopia and Egypt have a long history of ancient relations exchanging political, religious, and cultural ideas. In the ancient past, it is believed that Ethiopians and Egyptians both worshipped the same goddess Isis. Interestingly, features of the rock paintings around Harlaa are shared with those of ancient Meroitic Egyptians. This suggests ancient cultural links between the Ethiopians and Egyptians. This is echoed by Dionysius, an ancient Greek historian from the 1st century BC. He once relayed the Ethiopian narrative that Egypt was the product of Ethiopian colonists. Through this statement, it is believed that Egypt practiced an ancient culture that once originated in Ethiopia. Even with the introduction of Christianity in Ethiopia, Egyptians were again involved. Starting from the 4th century, the Ethiopian Church was under the administration of the Egyptian Coptic Church. In addition to Christianity, Egypt also had relations with Ethiopia through the Ottoman Empire. There are even Harari family names that exist today that are remnants of this historical intermixing with Egyptians. The ancient Axumites also buried their dead in tombs with pottery like the Harla and the Egyptians. The Axumite Empire spanned across modern-day Ethiopia, Eritrea, Djibouti, Somalia, and Somaliland from the 1st to 6th century. It is believed as far back as the late 1st millennium BC, South Arabian immigrants began to arrive in the Ethiopian highlands from across the Red Sea. When they did, they brought with them their religious beliefs such as their diverse gods. The Axumites worshipped the same gods as the southern Arabians. Pagan priests would intercede between the people and the gods in an effort to grant their desires. It was well known that the ancient Axumites were polytheistic. Fellow polytheists, the ancient Greeks and Romans, called Ethiopia a region of the gods at around the 1st century. Idol worship. According to the Ethiopian text, Kabra Nagast, the 10th century pagan Queen Makeda, Gudit, is mentioned as believing in Sabbaism. The religion is characterized as the worship of the sun, moon, stars, trees, and idols made of gold and silver. Interestingly, there exists a traditional Harari children's song that celebrates the full moon. The song calls out to the moon as a mother and offers her popcorn. The sentence attributed to the moon, her title as a mother and the offering of food, may suggest pre-Islamic worship of the moon. This could also be remnants of past animistic beliefs generally. Or, it could just be a children's song with no religious significance at all. It appears that polytheism remained in the Harari region as recently as the 16th century. It is reported that Shihab ad-Din, a follower of the Adalite jihadi Ahmad ibn Ibrahim al-Ghazi, constantly described Ethiopians as infidels, polytheists, and idol worshippers. Religious offerings. Harla burial sites contained graves that were usually covered with a dark ash. This may have been from burnt offerings. These offerings could have been made for the ancestors of the Harla people or their gods. In addition, cows were buried with the Harla people. In Cushitic culture, cows are associated with women. Also, adopted children would be given a cow as a gift. Ancient Egyptians would also bury animals with the deceased if it was a pet, or as an offering for the deceased to eat in the afterlife, or as an offering to the gods. The southern Arabians would make animal sacrifices for their gods. As previously mentioned, the Harari people used to perform animal sacrifices at the shrines for their saints. Saints and divine descent. Polytheistic religions of Arabia included shrines for their gods and pilgrimage to those shrines. The gods would be consulted for help with issues like safety and fertility. As discussed previously, the Harari people have shrines for their saints and perform a pilgrimage called ziyara to them. Just like the Arabians, the Harari people also visit shrines for issues like fertility, particularly the shrine of Iabida. The southern Arabian kingdoms had national deities whom the citizens would claim descent from. This is similar to how the Harari people consider the saint, Sheikh Badr Umar ar-Rida, as a common ancestor. The difference is that the southern Arabians believed they were the descendants of gods, while the Harari believe they are descendants of a religiously important human. Abu Badr is considered the holiest and most revered saint of the city. His wife, Iabida, is considered the highest female saint and the embodiment of the ideal Harari lady. In ancient Egyptian polytheism, each city had a god who was considered a special protector. The worship of this god was a part of the Egyptians' relationship with their home community. This concept is similar to how the Harari people consider Sheikh Badr the patron saint of Harar. He is believed to protect the city, and he is acknowledged in various communal activities such as wedding songs and religious rituals. Are these practices and symbolic elements found in Islam? Now each proposed element of a pre-Islamic belief system will be examined alongside Islamic practices to see if there are any correlations. Saints and rituals. In most Islamic sects, there is no concept of patron saints. Strict interpretations of Islam, such as Wahhabi movements, consider it a form of idol worship, i.e. shirk. The only major sect that includes saints, their veneration, and ziyara is Sufism. In non-reform movements and Sufism, intercession is commonly asked of holy men or saints. This practice is called tawassul. In Islam, animal sacrifice does exist, such as those that occur during the Eid al-Adha festivities. However, animal sacrifices are not performed in connection with human saint veneration. Afterlife and ancestor worship. In Islam, there are no post-burial ceremonies. In Islam, ancestors are not worshipped. Phallic symbolism. In Islam, there is no phallic symbolism. Superstitious beliefs and rituals. In Islam, there is no concept of protector spirits. Protection is sought by asking Allah. In Islam, the evil eye or al-Ain in Arabic is mentioned in the Quran. However, rituals to exorcise the evil eye are not mentioned. Instead, Quran recitations, prayer, and remembering Allah are recommendations for protection. In Islam, jinns are similar to Ethiopian zar spirits. These are supernatural beings that can possess humans and cause unexpected behaviors. As with the al-Ain, if one is believed to be possessed by an evil spirit, recommended Islamic remedies are Quran recitations, prayer, and remembering Allah. Rituals to remove spirits outside of these remedies are not expressed in Islam. Interestingly, it is believed that the concept of jinns originated in ancient Ethiopia and was then adopted in Arabia, and subsequently Islam, through Abyssinian slaves. In Islam, the people who possessed supernatural or divine powers are the prophets. However, magic and other supernatural abilities of other people were also recognized as being legitimate. Sacred nature. In Islam, rocks, trees, land, and other forms of nature are generally not considered sacred. The only exceptions exist in holy sites like in Mecca, i.e., the Black Stone. Polytheism. In Islam, pottery, burnt offerings, and animal sacrifices are not a part of human burials. In Islam, idol worship is strictly prohibited. In Islam, people are not considered to be the descendants of Allah. Syncretism of pre-Islamic and Islamic beliefs and practices. Syncretism is the fusion of different religious beliefs or traditions. This process is apparent within the history of the Harari people because elements of Harari culture such as saint veneration, animal sacrifice, phallic symbolism, superstitions and beliefs, and the sacredness of nature are present yet, largely, do not originate from Islam. As described by contemporary Harari people themselves, syncretism is an intuitive concept and a historical fact from throughout the Islamic world. It is believed that the people around Harra were introduced to Islam in the 11th century by Sheikh Ismail Jabardi. However, the Harla continued pre-Islamic indigenous funerary practices for centuries later, until at least the 13th to 14th centuries. The assimilation of the existing belief system was likely facilitated by Sufis. For instance, it is known that a man named Sharif Abu Bakr ibn Abdullah al-Idaris visited Harra in the 15th century and established the Qadriya Sufi order. Sufism is the only branch of Islam that includes saints, the veneration of these saints, and ziyarah, which are all elements found in Harari culture even today. While Sufism in its traditional sense is not thought of as practiced by the majority of Harari people today, the elements of its teachings exist within the Harari culture. Through Islamic Sufism, the spiritual world beliefs of the pagan Harari were modified to become acceptable within Islam. The concept of Prophet Muhammad as Allah's messenger could have been similar to the role of holy men and women within their pagan beliefs. Historically, Harari children are taught a song in Quran gay, Islamic classes, that specifically mentions intercessors as unnecessary because of the presence of Prophet Muhammad. From the beginning of Harar's history, the city's elders would come together to end practices that were deemed un-Islamic. This would have included traditional practices and any new emerging ones. However, pagan practices that could not be made permissible within the framework of Islam were perhaps continued secretly for a period of time. This is what happened in the 15th century with Ethiopian Christians in the face of direct instruction to abandon pagan practices. In response to the disobedience, the church forced the people to tattoo Christian inscriptions on their foreheads. This practice still continues in the form of a cross in some areas. The reluctance to let go of traditional practices also occurred with the Oromo throughout the 20th century. Many of them declared to convert to Islam or Christianity publicly but continued to practice Wakafana in private. Another example of the continuation of pagan practices that are at odds with the new state religion can be found in modern-day Pakistan. In a Pakistani village called Arifwala, some local Muslim women still adhere to an ancient fertility cult. The amalgamation of the local Sufi Islam with the pagan practice of phallic offerings has caused tension with conservative Muslim men in the village. This is because the practice threatens the repression of female sexuality promoted by Islam and the upholding of honor culture. This has caused some women to try to preserve the rituals in secret. Similarly, it has been suggested that stelae that were deemed as phallic may have been purposely destroyed in the past by those preaching Christianity and Islam in Ethiopia. It is known that a method in which Islam spread in Ethiopia is by propagators of Islam who would start their activities at or near existing, indigenous places of worship. Instead of destroying these pre-Islamic sites, they were transformed into Islamic ones, dedicated to venerating the very men who preached there. For example, pre-Islamic sites such as Mumilka in the Kokasa district and Karjal in the Meta-Welabu district of Oromia became attributed to Sheikh Hussein. Ancestral veneration, or worship, is a common ancient religious practice worldwide and is believed to have formed a part of the ancestral Harari belief system before it merged with Islam. For example, the belief in ancestral powers could be easily substituted by the Islamic baraka of the saints. The post-burial ceremonies that the Harari have traditionally practiced are likely remnants of past belief in ancestral worship. It has been documented that through the adoption of Christianity and Islam in Africa, post-burial ceremonies evolved over time. In the present day, it is common for the Harari to recall the actions of their grandparents and great-grandparents, expressing a desire to follow their lead. Furthermore, Cushitic peoples in the area would worship their ancestors as a means of obtaining human and animal fertility. This is similar to how traditionally, Harari people have consulted Islamic saints with fertility issues, which is mentioned earlier in this article. Interestingly, both Muslims and Christians in the area visit Islamic shrines in Harlaa. It has been observed that Christian women visit Islamic shrines in Harlaa to ask for fertility and blessings. This suggests a prior widespread and shared belief in ancestor worship before the Abrahamic religions gained popularity. At some point in history, Harari predecessors may have worshipped gods shared with South Arabia and consulted them at shrines. In Aksum, these gods had different areas of rule, such as the sun, sea, earth and war. They were invoked for reasons within their power. The pagan Ethiopians also presented the respective god with offerings as a token of gratitude for fulfilled blessings. This mirrors the saints of Harlaa, which have different areas of power, are invoked for reasons accordingly, and the subsequent offerings made at those shrines. If, for example, the Adare people did believe in polytheism, it could have easily transformed into a monotheistic belief. This could occur through assigning Allah as a supreme god and then maintaining additional divine figures as human saints, instead of gods. This idea is similar to how Islam's god Allah was chosen to be the supreme god above all others worshipped in polytheistic pre-Islamic Arabia. The pre-Islamic Harla who worshipped Waaq could have simply changed the name of the supreme deity from Waaq to Allah. This is what the Somali and Oromo did when they converted to Islam. Furthermore, syncretism of Eebe Waaq and Sufism in Somalia has been described. This suggestion of syncretism is supported by the fact that this process also occurred with other Ethiopian groups. For example, after Cushitic tribes of southern Ethiopia were conquered by the Christian Abyssinians, they adopted the Christian god as the supreme god and changed their own gods to minor deities or spirits. The Christian Abyssinians then adopted the belief in Zar as a possessive spirit. Another example of syncretism comes from the festival of Abo at Mount Sequala. The festival is dedicated to the Christian Saint Gevra Memphis Kittis, yet the people sing songs with frequent mentions of Allah, Adare, and other Islamic saints. The growth of Christianity in Ethiopia was supported by a group of missionaries called the Nine Saints. Their titles are Abba, which means father, mirroring the Harari usage of the word Au for Harari saints. This process of syncretism is also present through archaeological evidence found in Somalia as well. For one, before Islam, pre-Islamic burials were once performed at pagan sites. These burial practices were replaced with Islamic ones after Islam was introduced to the area. Interestingly, even religions themselves are partly a mix of prior, existing religions. Islam itself was built on a combination of existing beliefs including Christianity, Judaism, Sabianism, Zoroastrianism and Manichaeism. Before Islam, Manichaeism was a major world religion that spread from Persia starting from the 3rd century. There are many similarities between Manichaeism and Islam. Both religions were long considered Christian heresies before being recognized as distinct religions. Both Mani, the founder of Manichaeism, and Muhammad believed they were the last prophet in a list that started with Adam. Also, both believed that people of the past corrupted a universal message and that Jesus was never crucified but instead someone else was put in his place. Both Islam and Manichaeism also have an emphasis on spreading the religion. When Muhammad was spreading his ideas and claimed to be a prophet, the local people dismissed him for years because he wasn't saying anything new. The Quran itself records how people said he was simply repeating old stories. A picture of the pre-Islamic Harari beliefs. Based on research related to Eebe Waaq, Southern Arabian religions, and other areas, it appears that the consultation of ancestors or gods at shrines for problems such as fertility was an ancestral Harari practice. Ancestral worship played an important role in life and death. Perhaps the phallic symbolism found in Harari culture today are remnants of phallic symbols used in a fertility ideology. This is supported by research that suggests a widespread fertility ideology existed in the Horn of Africa. Belief in evil spirits and curses are common throughout Ethiopia and likely precedes the introduction of Islam. Traditional Harari practices and beliefs suggest the natural world was likely thought of as sacred, a source of protection by spirits, and played other spiritual roles. This suggests belief in Adare, Eebe Waaq and/or animism generally. Evidence of animism is apparent through the various significance placed on rocks, areas of land, trees, spirits, ancestor reverence, and the solar system. The burial practices of the Harla people reveal interesting links to the polytheistic beliefs of the ancient Egyptians and Southern Arabians. Grave goods, burnt offerings, and animal sacrifices could have been related to ancestral worship or polytheistic beliefs. The concept of Saint Adare as the highest saint and protector of Harla could mean that a similar concept of a supreme protecting deity of the community existed in the past. It is interesting to note that the name Adare has an ancient religious history. The mosaic of religious roots of the modern-day Harari people is not surprising. The people are a social/ethnic group that is the result of historical mixing with others. This includes Ethiopians such as the Adare, Harla, and Gaturi, and non-Ethiopians like Somalis and Middle Easterners. And with the movement of people, comes the movement of ideas. For example, each Muslim group could have had a unique expression of Islam, which was a modification of their own pre-Islamic beliefs. Once all of these groups merged, the legacies of their diverse indigenous beliefs did too. It can be asserted that the Harari practices and symbolism described in this article that are not found within Islam are a continuation of the spiritual beliefs of many different groups of people throughout history. The shift from indigenous spirituality to Islam did more than modify practices and beliefs. It changed the ways in which the people viewed themselves in relation to the spirit world and the physical world around them. Conclusion. Therefore, while much of the indigenous belief systems of the ancestors of the Harari people is not directly known, there is a lot that can be deduced. The largely un-Islamic practices of the veneration and consultation of intercessory entities, phallic symbolism, various superstitions and practices, and the sacredness and sentience of the natural world, all existed within nearby ethnic groups and were associated with widespread belief systems. These elements of pre-Islamic beliefs are also present in modern Harari culture and are, for the most part, not found within Islam. This is likely because they formed a part of the ancestral belief systems of the Harari people and merged with Islamic teachings through the process of syncretism.